sometimes giving case studies is really helpful. I find that to be true on so many levels because it depersonalizes situations that are common, and it allows someone to identify with a situation or a person thinking, oh yeah, I might have said that, or I can imagine I would have reacted the same way.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, Where God is at Work, a podcast that sits at the intersection of missions theory and practice. We're walking at our call to ministry in faraway places and happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauli, a missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Alessandro Di Leonardo, our church planter in Cisterna di Latina, and Jen Williamson, our missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What's it called? Is it like there's a name for it when you like reveal the time or space where you're recording. One of these is like breaking the third barrier or something like
The
that.
third wall.
Yeah, when we like talk about like when I'm realizing that when we say good morning versus good afternoon or oh well. How's everyone doing?
Good.
We had a rough night. We had sick babies. Everyone's congested. Not fevers or stuff. It's just that you can't sleep because you can't breathe very well, kind of thing. So we all slept in different spaces, but eventually we got everyone to sleep. So I was like, okay, someone's on the couch, someone's on our bed. It was like, okay, but we'll get everyone to fall asleep eventually. So yeah, it's a little bit of a rough start, and it's rainy and gloomy here. So it's kind of like
here too.
Icky morning. Feels like one of those mornings you just want to stay at home and get under some covers, watch a good movie or something. Well, rain or shine, we should talk about short-term missions tools today. This is our final episode for our mini-series on short-term missions. And so the third episode in every mini-series, we always look at like resources and tools and more the practical side of things. And so that's what we're going to do today. But before we jump into that, what would you say has been your best experience with short-term teams? And what do you think like made that uniquely special? And I guess we could even think either going on a short-term team or receiving a short-term team. We could kind of take a stab at either direction.
It's hard to say the best. I think every mission trip, short-term mission trip, has the positives and hopefully not so many negatives. Thankfully, the short-term missions that I've had over haven't had anything really negative. We had things that we learned from, but mostly positive. But I think if I would have to identify what makes a short-term team experience most positive is the pre-communications that we're having before they're coming. For me, I feel a lot more comfortable when someone or a group of people are communicating with me and trying to figure out. They push me to have a schedule. They push me to get ready, and in their part, I know they're getting ready. And so to me, those are the best. Then when they come over, it does play out that the mission trip is smoother and played out better. So to me, those are the key elements, or at least from my experience, has been that, oh yeah, we're communicating. It's not like, hey, we're coming. We haven't talked about anything.
Yeah. Same as far as the organizational thing, Alessandro. I felt that when I do have a really detailed schedule, of course, worked into the schedule rest times or break times, but really have a well thought out plan of where the time is going to be spent, even if, things always come up, even if you have to change and adapt, that goes way more smoothly than if the plan is too loose and you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants and trying to figure out, what comes next. So I had my favorite team visiting me it was super organized. When people arrived, I had an envelope with everyone's name on it that had euros in it that they had raised, but, I had converted, and we had them because there were going to be certain meals they were going to be on their own for, eating out for, that we'd built into the budget. So I had their euros in there. I had their metro tickets in there. I had a map of the city in there. I had a little card with a QR code on it that would put them to our address, our home. Like it was just super highly organized, and it really kind of put everyone at ease. and helped people settle in and just move into the experience.
Wow, those are both good. I think my strategy pre people coming has always been like just to expect it to be crazy and just go with the flow. So I kind of build in that disclaimer, like it's gonna probably not be organized. I think the best experience I had though was when we recruited the team that was coming based on the things that we thought we might do. So previously, it was always like a group of people or a church would reach out and kind of say, "Hey, we would like to send a team to you. Could you receive them?" And then it's like you don't know what skills you're getting, what kind of But this, it was like, we think we want to do some video interviews and we would like to do some music. And so literally, it was 4 people or 6 people, but like there was some people that had experience doing videography and there's some people that played music, and so it was like we were able to customize the trip to their skill set, which I think made everything, they felt more comfortable and confident, and we had like a clear objective of what we were trying to do. I think also, if I can just confess, the worst thing that I do is I always forget to plan the meals. Like we've had multiple teams and I don't know what it is, but I just never think of the food component of everything. And so, yeah, I don't know if I've learned the lesson yet, but I'm realizing that I need to learn this lesson, that I need to think ahead about the food.
That's a super big deal.
Yeah. You ever heard of the way people are broken down into like the priest, the prophet, and the king? And so like the king kind of like is more about the organizational part, the prophet more vision, and then the priest cares about the people. And so you kind of have to have that. So thankfully, in my case, my wife always reminds, "Oh, what about the food? Let's plan the food." She's always pushing. So if it wasn't for her, I would be just like you, because I'm more of a visionary and organizational part. Like let's this is what the jobs that need to be done. But it's like, yeah, but they need a break. They gotta eat. They gotta. So it's good to partner up with people who see differently.
Well, and we've had an experience where we had, when you have 10 people and you need a quick lunch, I don't know about Italy as much, but here, like, say we want to just go get Greg's. It's a tiny little restaurant. And all of a sudden, 10 people plus 2 more, that's like a huge overload to them. So we can like foresee that and anticipate that. And we have a relationship with the Greg guy. It's partly why we want to go to this restaurant. But David and I will like make up an order sheet for them in the morning. We're like, tell us what you want. And then David goes to the Greg guy while I take them on a whole long prayer walk, ending up at the Greg shop where the order is essentially ready. And it was really interesting because this particular team was from our church, and the church had another missionary in another town that they went to visit after. And that person also wanted to take them out sort of to a similar type restaurant or whatever, but they didn't do this pre-ordering thing. And it was like literally this, the restaurant had one person working. It was like this long, huge glitch in the day where people were like waiting forever for the simplest meal. And especially an American fast food mindset where you think your order should be ready in 3 minutes. And that became like a major negative. I mean, that's silly. There's 2 sides to that, right? Like the team needs to be adaptable and understand you're in a different place. But it was funny how much our forethought and organization on something about the food actually made us much more productive in doing the ministry pieces we wanted to get done. Because that didn't have to become a big thing all of a sudden.
No, for sure. Yeah. Well, I think we already started hinting at some of the things that we've each learned and incorporated. But let's expand that. Let's look at some practices. Let's talk about some training ideas, some planning ideas, even further that we've learned along the way. That would be good for every short-term mission trip. Like I confessed, it would be better to think about the food, think about some of those comfort details, I guess, that you don't necessarily think of, or that some people, I should say, don't necessarily think of.
One thing I like to do, and this requires a big commitment, but we've had people be housed with French people from our church. So this gives them a whole interesting window into how French people live. That takes care of breakfast too. So we ask the host to provide breakfast. And, French apartments are much smaller than what Americans are used to. And it sort of helps, I think, the people coming get into the reality of doing ministry in France and out of this glamour idea of we're going to Europe and castles and monuments and statues and fountains, which are all lovely and part of it. But the way people live day to day is also a really important piece of what they see. So when I can arrange homestays, it's productive on a lot of levels, not just for the people who are coming, but for those who are receiving as well.
Wow, I've never actually done that. I've hosted missionaries in my house, but never have had asked people to do that. To me, it's a new level. I'm not saying I'd have to think a lot about it, and definitely everything you said, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. They could experience it from people. Maybe the reason that I'm kind of shy about it is because I've experienced it on the other side where I was the guest, and it wasn't the best experience. And so I said, you know what, maybe with all the work that we're making them do, a little me time, a little space to themselves. So I'm kind of putting myself in their shoe. To me, what's a practice is, so we've had teams come in where there were multiple churches involved, like 3 churches. But even if it's one church, to me, it's important to identify who the leader is going to be. Who am I going to talk to? And I know it seems like, of course, you should know who that is, but it's not always the case. Sometimes the pastor is on the team, but he's not the leader. He's like, nope, not me. So it's important to identify who the leader is, because that's who you want to communicate all the details and let them do their leadership actions to their team when need be. And so to me, that is super helpful.
Yeah, that's a big point for me too. And also who's their leader on the ground. So I need to know who's leading their team, because that's an important contact point. But like when we've had teams come here, for example, to serve at the camp, to be doing food and cleaning and all of that while we're having a field retreat, there's a person at the camp that they're reporting to. And during that week there, that's their boss. Like, so even that team leader needs to know, I'm now reporting to this guy and this guy gets to tell us. And I've had some friction there where, like, the team leader at the camp had planned devotionals and some team building stuff, and the team leader of the mission team coming had planned some daily devotionals and things like that. And between them, they weren't clear about who's the boss. So that kind of communication, I think, is really important.
Well, it's kind of like, it's so sad to think like they were probably so excited to share these devotions. They prepped it. They're all on both parties, and then that caused friction.
Well, yeah, and to your point too, Sandra, about the pastor might be on the trip, but he's not the lead person. I was on a trip with an interesting situation where it was kind of a nonprofit ministry and a church kind of combining to make a team to go on a mission trip. And the nonprofit group, they had a leader that was the one that kind of recruited all of their people to come. And then obviously we had established a leader from the church side. And for the most part, everything played out well. Like the missionaries that were hosting us understood like it was the church leader that was the leader of the team and all of this kind of stuff. But what was playing out was that the participants of the team that were recruited by the nonprofit, even if it was like clearly indirectly stated who the leader was, they still looked and followed the lead of the guy who they knew better. And so for the most part, he was very humble and followed, the rest of the lead. But there was a moment where he kind of took a position that was different, and you just immediately saw like everyone kind of, I'm thinking in Italian, si sono schierati. Everybody lined up on their side of the aisle. So yeah, it is interesting. That idea of leadership is something not to be overlooked. I think too, there's something to preparing the people that they're going to interact with on the ground. So like just in November, we had a team come. I tried to partner with various different ministries to kind of give them exposure to different things. And what I found was important was to also be talking to the people that we were going to partner with and help them understand, okay, this team is coming, this are kind of the dynamics, this is kind of the motive behind why I want to introduce them to you, why we want to help you with this project. And it kind of helped set the understanding for the locals. One of the things I've realized is like managing expectations of the people coming, but also the people receiving is kind of becomes our role, I think, in a way, when we're the connecting point between the people coming from wherever they're coming, even if it's in the same country, to the local people working.
That's true. That's so good. Jesse talked last week, Jesse Cruz, about the importance of pre-field training that goes beyond here's how you get your passport situated and here's what you need to put in your suitcase. And I found that that has also been very helpful to people as we've been able to, even we had teams coming that we knew they were coming far enough in advance that when I was in the States, they would organize a team meeting and I could meet with them and I would do all sorts of cultural training. I would talk a little bit about what it means to do missions with, about the attitudes of coming that are helpful, anecdotes. Jesse Cruz talked about this a little bit too. Sometimes giving case studies is really helpful. I find that to be true on so many levels because it depersonalizes situations that are common and it allows someone to identify with a situation or a person thinking, oh yeah, I might have said that, or I can imagine I would have reacted the same way, without having the spotlight on them and feeling like they've been exposed. So I will often bring some case studies and say, Joe missionary went to this town and did this and this and this and this happened. And this is what the locals thought. And this is what Joe thought. And this is what the church leaders thought. And this is how the missionary felt. You know, what would you do in this situation? So those are helpful.
Do you know if there's like a place that has like case studies prepped, or is that something you just kind of your own storytelling, maybe that you remember or that you've like compiled somehow?
Yeah, I compile them from multiple experiences to try and keep identities carefully hidden away. But I compile them from real life experiences, from asking French people, what's been your experience? I do this when I train long-term missionaries. So I've gathered, real life stories and especially when I hear a repeated similar story, it's easy to write it into one story that gives sort of all the aspects and nuances of the idea. And it's very helpful for both sides, for the French to see something from a missionary standpoint and for a missionary to kind of hear it from a receiving end.
Jesse Cruz did mention that there are some free ones in the academy from Touch the World that they do. And then I'm sure if you look them up, I think ideally or wishfully, I wish I was writing them as well. I think they're more personal, but if there's someone who's done the work and we can use them, that's also great.
Yeah, I was recently talking to an aspiring church planter, an Italian guy, and he was sharing some of his hesitations to partnering with missionaries based off of some of the experiences he has had. And yeah, it was quite embarrassing to say the least of
Yeah.
how he was treated. So no, this is all really good, and we've mentioned a couple times now. Our last episode was an interview with Jesse Cruz, the director. I think it's the director or president. I forget the title exactly, but the boss, let's say, at Touch the World, and he did share some great resources. I would encourage everyone to check out touchtheworld.org. But what are some other things, some other resources, maybe that we would like to share with our listeners? Um, Obviously, there's one of the things I'm thinking about that we recommended in the other, I think we talked a little bit about with Jesse Cruz, was the impact of a book like When Helping Hurts. That's a book that I know many churches have as a required reading before a short-term missions trip. What are some others?
In terms of books, The Culture Map helps people by Aaron Myers helps people understand some of the differences and nuances in culture. And I'm a big fan of Andy McCullough's book, Global Humility, which I've recommended in the past. But another thing I like to do to help them with the culture piece is I recommend a French movie that I know has good subtitles. That is kind of fun for people who aren't going to read a book but might be interested in learning a different way. There's also several YouTubers who talk specifically about differences between French and American culture, and they're short. They're clips, of 3 to 8 minutes, and those are fun to send along in emails, prepping people to give them some food for thought and start them thinking about differences that they're going to be encountering specifically in coming to where I am. And then I also like to encourage them to read the book of Jonah. Andy McCullough's book, Global Humility, really breaks down some of the missionary lessons that are important from the book of Jonah. But I'll have them read the book of Jonah in preparation. And when I lead the devotions for a group during a mission trip, I base it on that.
I think I've mentioned it before, but I think it's important mentioning it again. Is one of the greatest, or a great resource, is the church itself, and to kind of see what they are already doing. And if you need to supplement that, or if you need to kind of add a little nuance because of the place that they're going. But I think it's where I usually start. What kind of training are you guys doing? And listen from there. And that helps me out to not have to reinvent the wheel if they're already doing something. Obviously, there's some groups that really are not doing anything. Then you have to step in and help out. But I think a great resource is also reaching out and say, what kind of training are you already doing in the church? And then what do I just need to supplement?
Yeah, there was a pastor, a youth pastor actually, in one of the churches that we attended in the Midwest. He had an idea. He thought, I'm going to be walking with the high school students for about 3 to 4 years of their life. So he kind of had that idea of like, we're going to do for the freshmen a local, or I think it was for the sophomores, like a local. The second year does a local missions trip. Then the next time they do one to another state, kind of farther away. And then for their last year, they actually went, I think it was to Trinidad or some other place farther away. And so it's kind of built in this idea of Judea, Samaria, the rest of the world. And I thought that was an interesting form of training. And it might not be replicable or easy for everybody, but I think there's a principle there that we could learn. Like if you think you're going to go do a short-term missions trip, I would say experience helps. So why not go volunteer somewhere in your local city first, get exposure to a different community or a different culture? We live in such a global world now. You can find people from a different part of the world right there where you live, and just find a way to volunteer to be around them. And then maybe take a next step and do something a little bit more stretching, a little bit farther away from home. All these things, thinking about, okay, I'm going to go on that missions trip in a year or a year and a half, and be using those as ways to learn, like, what does it look like to be uncomfortable? How do I react? Because I think that's the other thing. When you go on a cross-cultural short-term missions trip, there's a lot packed into 10 days to 2 weeks. And how do you react under that pressure, under that uncomfortable feeling, is going to make or break in some ways that trip.
Yeah, that's great to already incorporate experience to be able to then do better for the next round. And in fact, that one of the tools that we always use, and this is more on the after, is debriefing. You have to debrief. Our mission trips, or our short-term mission trips that we host, have gotten so much better for us as a host, but also for the people coming. Even if it's a new team, I already know what to tell them. I already know what we're expecting, and we can have that conversation because we've had so much experience. But not just experience you can forget. You have to debrief and talk and hear other people's perspective. I have it with my staff, my team, to talk about like what are the things that worked. And then I have it with short-term mission leaders, usually having a Zoom call afterwards, usually probably like a week or two later, just to kind of let them settle in back and kind of say what were the highlights. I usually did a good, bad, and ugly GBU. Good, what was really good, what was bad, but could easily be fixed, and ugly, what was something that, hey, next time we can't do this. This was not good, unhealthy. usually don't want to have a lot of uglies. Hopefully there's not a lot, but it's also good to highlight those. And then we look at those when we're going to have the next short-term team come, or if there are recurring people, partners coming, then we have learned from that and they already know it. And so it's really good.
That's really good. That's a great idea for a debrief, Alessandro.
I don't think we know these guys, but there's another podcast out there, and it's actually called Reimagining Short-Term Missions. And so even just something like that, listening and reading books that we've recommended, but even listening to like another podcast after you've listened, obviously, to listening to another podcast that also talks about short-term missions that kind of looks at different aspects. I think awareness is a great part of training, just being aware of what's happening. I also think that the more relationship building you can do beforehand. So like, I mean, obviously this depends on the missionaries and the different situations that you're going to be in, but if there's a way to have a texting or Zoom call or video call ahead of time, the more kind of, you talked, Jen, about being able to even be physically present because of scheduling, lining up for a training or for a time with the team. I think those are all helpful things. The other thing is if you can repeat the same trip, like going the same church, going to that place more than once, that helps, I think, all around, because it helps the host get more comfortable. It helps the team coming be more comfortable. You know, Alessandro, you've had that experience. We've had that experience too, where if the people know you, they've come multiple times, that takes away a lot of the unknowns and different little mistakes that happen. This has been our series on short-term missions trips. I think it's safe to say we don't think we should just throw out short-term missions trips, but we do think it would be really good to have some thought put in ahead of time and to be strategic about how you go about short-term missions trips. So thanks for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. Your ministry is important, and we hope that you consider your time with us an investment in your work. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with a friend. Thank you, and remember to keep going wherever Jesus leads.